headwinds we're encountering with the platform today, Derick.
Hey, everybody. Derick Van Ness here, live from Big Life Financial. And today we've got an awesome treat for you guys. I'm working with Rob Williams. Most of you who've been attending our webinar series know this. And we're going to be talking about the 5-question mind trick that will teach your employees to think like business owners. Now, I know as a business owner, this is everybody's dream. How do I get people to think like me, act like me, and help to replace me in certain parts, or hopefully, eventually, all of the business, right? And so today we're going to be tackling that. And Rob does this in such a simple and elegant format that I think you guys are going to love it. So if you don't have it, make sure you've got a notebook so you can take some notes. This is going to be really important. If you just walk away with this and can get 5 or 10% better with your people, and they can handle that much more workload, or you can turn people who are mid-level into leaders in your business, this is going to be a game changer. And the truth is, I think it can transform your entire organization all the way from the top to the bottom. So having said all that, welcome, Rob. Great to have you here.
It's good to be back, Derick. And you're absolutely right. This is such an important topic because all of the businesses that I've worked with, all of the founders that I've coached, whether they're at the earlier stages, whether they're trying to source their first investment, or whether they're scaling towards an exit and considering businesses to acquire. If I think back to the board meetings, what do you think the most popular in-focus topic is across that whole piece?
100%. I don't even have to guess. It's people. How do I get the right people?
Yeah.
Yep. Or get their people.
Yeah, and it's really interesting why that is. And when you look at the cost of a business, quite often the majority of the costs are in the payroll. As the business grows, we know it's inevitable we're going to need more people to be able to support with delivery. And as we have more people, we need more managers. And as the business grows, it's very easy for people to become disconnected from the original vision of the founders or the business owners. Mm-hmm. And also, as individuals, when we think about something like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we're always going to go to self and ego around self-preservation if things go wrong. So if things go wrong in a business, I'm not always going to put my hand up and say, my fault, it broke, I'm sorry, because our immediate thing is, oh, they're going to think I'm incompetent and they're going to fire me. And if they fire me, then I've still got a mortgage to pay, I've got housekeeping to make, I've got pension to save for. All of the things that our income gets spent on is, it's absolutely critical to our sense of security and how we live. And that is massive, absolutely massive. And that extends at every single layer. So from a private equity perspective, I'm worried as an operating partner. So, my responsibility is to work with the CEO to be able to maintain the value of that portfolio company and identify risk in terms of where it might be likely to go off its investment thesis. Yeah. Effectively, the performance targets the business has set itself that give me confidence that it's going to grow in valuation. And I'm always thinking, is the CEO telling me the truth? What are they hiding from me? Because, again, it's going to be a difficult conversation. And naturally, we tend to avoid these things. And then if it isn't the CEO, then it's his leadership team. What are the leadership team hiding from the CEO? And then what are the management team hiding from the leadership team? And this creates huge amounts of risk for me as an investor. If there isn't clarity over how we're leveraging the assets within the portfolio company in an efficient, effective way to deliver the outcome that I want as the investor, then we've got a real problem, a real problem. So a lot of this has come around from my perspective as an investor in terms of where I see value in organizations. And then I work with founders and business owners to help them take on the investor perspective. And pretty much everybody wants their staff or employees to think like owners, because it means they're not wasting money. They naturally focus on the highest priority items and they can see risk when it's coming around. But unfortunately, that isn't the case. And most people think that business breaks down because of bad strategy or poor execution or people not caring enough. But that's not really what I've seen. And over the last 20 years, sitting in boardrooms, negotiating deals, making my own investments in businesses, the pattern that I see keep showing up is far simpler. And the real problem is misalignment. It's very easy for us to say, our people aren't good, they're lazy, they don't work hard enough, they're unfocused. But actually, good people, unclear expectations, and misaligned priorities. And I'll repeat this a few times today. 99% of people don't show up to work deliberately wanting to do a bad job. But if they're not focused and they don't have direction and they don't know what good looks like, and they might see their efforts not being recognized or being devalued in some way or conflicting with someone else in the organization, we tend to feel quite deflated. And I coined this the 5 keys, and it was interesting. I was sat in a restaurant with my wife, and my awareness was there because I was kind of thinking about this a lot. And any conversation that was negative about work, I would just tune into. And I was picking up all of these things like, my boss is an a-hole. He doesn't know what he's doing. The company doesn't care about their employees. And I just kept hearing this thing repeatedly. I'm just going to do the bare minimum.
Right.
Yeah. I'm going to work to rule. I'm going to do enough so I don't get into trouble and I can keep my salary and protect my existence. Again, going back into fear and protection. And I'll be fine. But I don't owe that company anything. And I thought this is such a massive mismatch. When I'm working with founders at some stages of the journey, they can't afford to pay themselves because they need to make payroll. Or they lose a big client and suddenly they're 40,000 down a month and they've got to figure out a way of being able to save it. But everybody's on 3 months' notice. So they've got this big cost that they have to ensure that they can meet without having the revenue to offset it. And it causes panic. And I've seen it many, many, many times. And as you know, I'm always on the side of the founder and the business owner, because what we do is we help business owners recognize their businesses as assets or wealth creation vehicles and support them to leverage that asset in a way that enables them to be able to meet their ambition. What we talk about, the perfect alignment of personal, financial, and business goals, and the ability to be able to leverage your people to be able to create that, and all of the fault lines and traps you can fall into if you don't do it properly is just absolutely massive. So standing in coffee shops, walking through hotel lobbies, sitting in airports, I challenge anybody. Now this is front of your consciousness. You're not going to be able to avoid the conversations you overhear. And some of you are going to think, well, that kind of makes me feel a bit better about my situation, because clearly it's not just me, it's every business owner that experiences this. But, when you hear things like, sorry, go on, Derick.
I was going to say, let me jump in here. As you're listening to these conversations, I want you to think about this. This is a lesson I learned a really long time ago that has been so powerful about why people do what they do, especially in a job situation, right? And I learned this from a friend of mine. He's from Japan, and we had a meeting, and he was saying people do things for 3 reasons. The first reason is they do things out of fear, right? Which is what you're talking about, Rob. I'm going to do just enough to not get fired, right? Mm-hmm. I'm afraid I'm going to get fired, cross that line, and I'm going to say the race is over. I'm good, not going any further, right? And that's how a lot of people operate. The second one is maybe the better group of people. Like you said, they're the people who do things out of they're like scorekeepers. So they're going to do just enough out of duty, right? You pay me X, I'm going to give you X amount of effort. In their mind, wherever that's equal, that's what they're going to give you. So they're maybe going to do more than the minimum. They're going to do what you're paying them to do, right? And there's a lot of people who fall in that. And we would consider those a lot of times our good, steady Eddie type of employees, right? But what we're talking about today is how do you go from that, I'm going to trade $1 for effort, to people doing things out of the third reason, which is love, right? I'm passionate about this. This is a mission. I support the founder. I believe in our cause. What are we really here to do, right? We're not here to just show up and fill the time. We're here to have an impact. And when people come from that place of love, that's when you see people making the extra effort, coming up with the ideas, taking ownership of things, being a leader, because they want to see this thing succeed the same way they want to see their kids' soccer team win or football team, right? Is they're passionate about it. It matters to them. And when you get employees thinking that way, and like you said, Rob, what does that come from? Alignment, right?
Mm-hmm.
When they're aligned with you, suddenly you have this happen. And I'll tell you what this looks like. I mean, a lot of you know my story way back when the mortgage meltdown happened in 2008. I had a couple of people on my team. I was flipping houses, and I literally had people on my team who stayed without me paying them for 3 months just because they said, I don't ever want to not work with you if I can help it. So I'm willing to stay here. You don't even have to pay me. And if this turns around, I want to be here so that I can continue this ride with you. So they weren't getting paid anything. There was no duty. There was no fear of them getting fired. They just showed up out of love. And I got to tell you, when I had to reconcile my taxes and everything else, when all the dust settled, it was really nice that they spent a lot of time organizing everything for me for months after I could pay them, right? And certainly we had lots of conversations about how I didn't think that was such a great idea, but that's how far that can go for you. Imagine if you had a team of employees that felt that way about what you're doing. If you just stopped paying them because the business was struggling, they'd say, it's okay, we'll stick around for the next 90 days and we'll support you through this. And then hopefully we can all get back on our feet and keep this going. That's how much this means to us. And that's what we're talking about here, Rob, is getting employees who think and feel that way. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. That is a really great story. And I think it's an exercise that I would do. And clearly it's not always feasible to work without being paid. But if you make a list of your employees that if they could afford to, that would do that, it'd be interesting immediately to look at that comparison. And today's session is all about comparisons, okay, and cross-referencing. So that's the first exercise, really, is think about who in your team could you rely on to work without being paid because they believe in you. They believe this is something that's going to be overcome and it's a deferred payment and they will get it back, but they don't want to leave because they believe in the mission and they believe and trust in you as a founder. And we'll come to that later on, which is one of the questions that we're going to ask. But also think about it. How do you earn that in the first place? So if your working environment is full of shifting targets, unclear priorities, moving standards, that's going to wear people down. That ambiguity just feels like inefficiency and wasted effort. And I preach predictability, and I love looking at an organization as a control system, because I really like to believe that if we look at a set of input factors, then predictably we can reach a kind of a parameter of an output that's reliable, because we have control over what goes in and the end production. So when we get this right, it means that we can stop wasting time, we cut down on rework, we execute quicker, we reduce managerial friction, and we save time on the amount of meetings that we have to kind of re-clarify what was never really that clear to begin with. And this is really about saving you real money, because when we have this misalignment, there's massive margin erosion and enterprise value impact, and it blocks our ability to scale. So one of the questions I would ask is, why are you here? So what did you see when this session was advertised that made you think this could be quite interesting to me? And it's normally related to an outcome where you feel that the investment in your people is not necessarily getting you where you need. There are individuals in the business that you think are holding you back. sales aren't where you would want them to be. Lead generation isn't necessarily where you'd want it to be. Your margins aren't as high. You feel that the cost of delivery is too much. Maybe your expenses are too much. Whatever it is, there's a reason why you're here. And mostly to solve that, and again, private equity, you've got money. What are you going to do? One of the reasons I back a CEO is because I trust them to be able to spend money, invest in something that's going to deliver a better return than the cost. It's going to add up to an outcome that is far greater than the sum of the individual parts. And as an investor, that's what I want to see. Can you speculate on a solution that's going to solve this? And normally the CEO will say, yeah, I'm going to bring in an efficiencies consultant, or we're going to implement this technology transformation, or we're going to go down the acquisition route and we're going to buy this company, or there's this amazing hire. We're going to go out and get this guy. He's the best in the industry, or we're going to go and get some other consultant to go and try and focus and try and fix it. All of them are perfectly valid ideas. But what I found, if you don't have the foundation right, all you're doing is layering on cost and another problem and more confusion. So what I like about these 5 questions, or the 5 keys, as I've named them, is as a business owner, you can do this any time and identify where those fault lines in the business are and cascade this to your leadership team and your management team. And within a week, you can shift mountains in terms of how people feel about the business, people who want to remain in the business because they believe in what you're doing, and we can smoke the people out that are drained on your resources because they've fallen out of love with the business. They don't trust you. They think your strategy is flawed. They don't think you're going to make it. Yet they'll still show up and take wages to try and deliver to achieve something they don't think is possible. And that is flawed thinking to me, Derick. So the 5 keys is so important because of those. And I kind of take responsibility for more people leaving businesses, leaving their jobs, or eventually being fired as a result of this, because it is a light box into wrong people, wrong job, wrong organization. So this is a practical alignment system that works at every level. So I've done it as an investor to a CEO, as a coach to a CEO. I've worked with CEOs to apply it to their leadership teams, and I've worked with leadership teams to roll it out across entire departments. Whether it's a $1 billion defense company, single department, or whether it is a $500,000 a year revenue marketing company, or whether it's somebody that has just got the first idea and they're about to take on their first hire. It works at every level, so it's universal. And I'm really excited that later this year, inspired by one of the management books I read coming up, in my early 20s, The 1 Minute Manager, we've written this as a fable, so people can actually follow in the footsteps of the business owner, speaking to the owner investor and learning some of these lessons and some of these rules. So you're getting an advanced view of what is going to be contained in that book, but is ultimately a structuring of things that I've always believed and have continued to learn and develop my own understanding about how this particular element impacts business value and profitability since I started. So roughly, those 5 questions are we aligned on the mission? Why are we doing this? Are people's roles clear? Who's doing what? Is it a priority? Is it something that I would want them to be doing? Are standards fully understood with zero ambiguity? So tacit understanding, this is what we need. Yes, chef, I've got the order. I'm now going to make it. Yes, so there's some kind of communication that we're both signed up to this standard. And then for me, the most powerful key number 4, is there real confidence in what we're doing as a business? And do I believe I can achieve that standard in my role? And if not, why not? And what can we change to enable me to be able to do that? And what is the reward and recognition? What's the payoff for me achieving that particular standard? Now, a quick caveat on this. When I told people about this, do you know the response I got, Derick? Well, isn't that obvious? Isn't that just what managers should be doing?
Well, it's like this, Rob. I remember working with the team and we said, hey, somebody said, hey, maybe integrity should be one of our values. And somebody else said, why do we even have to say that? But it's like, if you don't say it, it goes unsaid, right? And it seems obvious to some people, but when you're working with the team, people come from all kinds of backgrounds, all kinds of ideas about what's right or wrong. You know, I had a very interesting experience. I grew up in Utah. Everybody in Utah, I don't say everybody, a lot of people are very honest, a very honest culture, right? People are very good-hearted. And we were out at a festival, and somebody put down this cool little like lighter case on a table, and it was like handcrafted, and it was really neat. And this person who was with me walked over, and they grabbed it and put it in their pocket. And I said, what did you do? And they said, well, if somebody leaves it, it's mine. I can have it. And I was like, no, that's not a thing. But the way they grew up in a very rural community where they grew up really poor, they were like, yeah, no, that's what my mom said. If somebody puts it down and I pick it up, it's mine. Yeah. And I was like, wow. And my point is, you don't know what your team, especially as it grows, you don't know what their values are. You don't know what they grew up with. So if you don't say, you can't steal stuff, right? Yeah. I know that sounds funny. They might think that's okay. And obviously that's an extreme example, but same idea with integrity. Like if you don't say it, people might think it's okay to be out of integrity. And to your point, Rob, alignment, clarity, vision, all these things are layers that create that consistency so that people have really clear guardrails about where you're going and what's right and how you do business.
Definitely. And one of my formative experiences when I qualified Lean Six Sigma was all about variables and variation. And, you know, back to my control system and predictability, you want to try and control those variables, identify what's critical to quality that gives you that focus and prioritization and control to get the outcome that you need. And exactly as you said, you know, I've got 50 people in my organization. They're all different ages. They've all had different experiences. They've got different levels of knowledge. They've got different values. They've all had different upbringings. That is too much variation for me to believe that I can control, because there's an expectation that surely everybody reads the Bible and we just follow the rules of the Bible. You know, it's literally kind of almost that naive that there is this sort of this kind of social rule book that everybody naturally is going to follow. So we create this social norm where there's no friction, and that doesn't happen. And when people say, well, isn't that obvious to me? I say, okay, talk to me about your current business, where you currently work, whether you own it or whether you're an employee there. When did you last have a disagreement with a colleague? When did you last go home and say to your partner, not a great day today? I think I might need to start looking for another job. It's one of those situations, isn't it, where probably 75% of employees are always on the lookout for another job, because if another job came in that was paying more than they were currently earning, 75% of people would probably move just for the additional earnings, because whatever reason, they're not satisfied where they are. There isn't that deeper connection. And I'm sure there's lots of academic studies around connection and commitment drivers, and that isn't me. You know, by all means, once you've gone through this process, dive into academia and some of these studies and theories, and there'll be practitioners that focus on organizational development. I know enough to be dangerous, but I'm not going to teach you academic theories. I'm going to teach you something that is really simple. So as a business owner, I know I can do it straight away. And like I said, within a week, no navel gazing, we've literally just got out there and we've had the right conversations. We've asked ourselves what it is that we want as a business, and we've quickly implemented something that gives us confidence that we have now reached alignment and we have a plan to be going forward. So hopefully that sets the scene for what we're going to be covering today. I'm just going to press start here, Derick, which hopefully will share some slides. I'm always nervous to do this. Oh, no, it looks okay. That's great. So like I said, what I want to do is help you create a wealth creation vehicle where there is a level of control and predictability to the outcome that you want, which is your personal, business, and financial goals. And why are you here? Yeah, it's really important. What is your biggest priority at the moment in your business? So as a business owner, are you where you think you should be? Would you like to be further ahead than you are currently? Or are there some things right now where there's some deep risk or deep fault lines or deep level of uncertainty that you want to try and fix? And you all believe that there is an element of people or human capital that is not necessarily being leveraged in the right way to prevent you feeling in that. So if you're not happy with your current directional growth rate, you need to start thinking differently, because if we keep doing the same things, the input doesn't change, then it's scientifically impossible you're going to get a different outcome. So you have to shift how you're doing things as input factors to be able to get a better outcome. So with these wealth creation principles and viewing your business through the lens of an investor, I believe that we're going to be able to give you that shift and change that you really want. Now, I said earlier on, I've used the 5 keys on people that are at the very earliest stages of their business, because people come to me for investment and they don't know enough about what it is that they want to do, which makes me very nervous about giving them money to try and create it. Often it's quite whimsical. It's not very well thought through. They haven't done any kind of level of analysis about the market or how they're going to do what they're going to do, how much it's going to cost to create, and what they think the likely revenue returns are going to be. So I try and get them on this page straight away. What is the long-term vision? Why are you doing this? What is the end game for you? How does this fit around your personal life and goals? What is the legacy that you want the business to leave behind? And is there an exit strategy? So reverse engineer it. What are your personal goals in the future? What does the business need to do to be able to fund that? And what is the financial gap that you'll have from today to reaching that financial target? And then how do we turn that into some kind of unit economics? How do we measure the units and scale those units to reach the size of business and the value of business that's going to give you the lifestyle that you want? So that's the first deep breath moment. How clear are you about that? And whenever I'm coaching someone, I have to go through that process. Same on our Wealth Your Way program, Derick. It's got to be the starting point. Otherwise, how do we know that what we're doing is serving our higher aims and our higher goals? And that's a fault line in itself. If we don't know and we're just existing, dealing with the things that are landing on our feet or being particularly opportunistic, that's not a very efficient way to focus and spend time to try and get a result that leads us in a direction that we want to go into. So think about that end game position as a priority. And if you haven't got that written down somewhere, or you don't think you could explain it clearly, then get the journal out, get the pen out, and start sketching and let yourself be free. Don't constrain yourself. Anybody is capable of achieving whatever their vision and dreams are. Obviously, the bigger those vision and dreams are, it's probably going to be more complex, and it might rely on some luck, and probability will be a bit lower. But I never work in binary terms. No one should tell you what you can and can't believe. No one should shatter dreams. If you think you can achieve that result, then let's start off by at least getting a plan or seeing what other people have done to be able to get there in the past, and start to formulate the set of actions within a sequence time staged pathway to help you get there. So end game, Derick, very, very important. And I know this is something that you're very, very passionate about.
Yeah, let me just say one thing on that real quick, Rob. If you're unclear on what your end game is, I found that most people are clear on what they don't want before they're clear on what they do want, right? When you go out and you're dating and you're younger, you go out, oh, I don't like that. This doesn't work. That's not a good fit. Eventually, you kind of get clues. So I think if you can write down all the things you don't want, and then maybe write down the opposite of what would be the opposite of that. And that'll probably get you pointed in the right direction. And then as you work through this, and like Rob said, listen to your heart. The other thing I would say is it doesn't need to be a final draft. This vision is generally a working document. In other words, if you try and find the perfect meaning for the rest of your life, you're never going to do it. So just ask yourself, right now, what do I want for my future? Where do I want to go? And just like any road you travel, as you come over the horizon, you can see the next step. You might turn right, you might turn left, you can move. So don't tie yourself into trying to get it perfect. Create a vision that feels pretty true for you, or as true as it can right now, but don't go too far with trying to make it perfect. Otherwise, you'll just get stuck in paralysis. Those are my two biggest things is if you don't know what you want, figure out what you don't want, and look at the opposites. And the second thing is create a working draft. Don't try and make a final draft. It's a lot easier to do, and it will get you driving in the right direction. And as you move down that road, you'll get clearer.
And that's great advice, Derick. That really is good advice. And if you aren't clear, then certainly an exercise I feel if you don't take, then you're holding yourself back. And as business owners, I see you as asset managers. You have a number of assets or forms of capital in your business that you decide how to deploy, use, change, invest in. And as an asset manager, we're looking for leverage or synergy. So like I said earlier on, how do we create an entity or an asset size that is far greater than the sum of the individual parts? So I've got 1 + 1 = 3, because that's the kind of formula I like as an investor. Yeah. So how do you create something that's more valuable than those individual parts that you've used to be able to create the business? And if you've been in business a while, then you're in a pretty select group. Most people who start businesses don't really get past those first 6 to 12 months. You've already got through a number of cycles and traps and fought against those patterns into a position where you understand your market, you've got customers, you've hired people, and you've got those people focused on doing things that is creating profit. Okay. The question is, with the 5 keys, can you enhance that even more and turn 3 into an even larger number? So that's really important. And what I'm now doing is I'm putting an investor lens on the business. So when I go into a business or people want investment, or we're looking at a broader strategy, I always go through 3 different phases. Okay. The first is analysis. So when we talk about analysis, it's data, it's information that gives you confidence that what you're doing is likely to deliver a result. And that's when we start looking at things like markets, ratios, how much money you're spending versus your revenue or versus your profit, comparison against your competitors. We look at the viability. So I've worked with people and they've said, this is my goal here. And I said, I don't think there's enough velocity of decisions taking place in your market. It was pretty niche to be able to give you there. So again, you've set out on a fool's errand to some extent, because your current product and service, your target, it goes beyond the market, and that's impossible. So how can you embark on a plan and spend money and time on something that's impossible? So we've got to make sure that we get that formula right. And what is different about you or unique about you that makes people come to you rather than your competition? And Pete, you probably heard the term moat. Where are there moats around what it is that you do that gives us confidence that you can't be disrupted, which is obviously a key issue for the future of any business. And AI, a lot of people in certain industries are very concerned about that as a good example. So do the analysis, because the analysis is also the substance with which you can sell the ambition to different stakeholders. Now, that might be an investor or it might be an employee. Why should we follow you? Yeah, because I'm taking this business from 2 million to 10 million because I see the market opportunity. I can see these people doing these things and we can do it better because we've got the right people, we've got this know-how, we've got money to invest. Yeah, so I'm giving reasoning all the time on how we can continue to build a business that's going to be a higher performing entity than anyone else in the market. So that's analysis. And I could give you 100 questions that the bigger the business, the more detail I want to see based on the type of ask they're going to be wanting for money, whether that's investing in organic growth, transformation, or acquisitions. But analysis is really, really key. The second is capital. And as you can see, one of these capitals is human capital. So this is the people, and this is where 5 keys gives me a great level of confidence. Because, we've also got social capital, which is how different stakeholders, the market sees you, your customer sees you. That consistency that says, oh, I know Big Life Financial. They're the best in the industry for doing this. Or I know Derick Van Ness. He's got this background, and that's why he created it. So it's the awareness publicly of what your business is. We've got structural capital, which is how efficient are you? How do you use data and information? How do you use systems to be able to process and store that data? How do you use automation to be able to deliver manual tasks far cheaper? How do you use performance to make sure the control system is operating in the right way? And that's structural capital. And then we have customer capital. How well do you understand your markets, your propositions, the needs of your customers, the volume of the customers, how to reach them at scale, how to get them engaged and excited, and how to convert them, and how to drive lifetime customer value by continuing to try and think about where's the next transition? What next problem are we solving by growing the range of products and services that you can provide to them? And on the Wealth Your Way session later on, Derick, that's exactly what we're going to be covering, is how do you tell the story of the future in a way that gets a buyer excited when people are ready to exit. But who's making decisions around those other forms of capital? It's your people. So if your people are misaligned, how can you expect them to make the right decisions to be able to give you that result? And some of the things I'm going to tell you later on around that are absolutely shocking. So we've got all of these different forms of capital that we need to leverage and optimize as asset managers of our business to be able to deliver huge returns, whether that's for shareholders, whether it's paying back debt to the investor, or whether it's money in my pocket that I can then take as income and earnings and reinvest and everything that we talk about in terms of wealth management. So capital is really important. So, listening to your team's voices and perspectives can be really helpful. And sometimes the natural instinct is, I shouldn't create this. I should be speaking to what my people want to try and shape this, like values. I've worked with a lot of HR people that say, oh, you shouldn't put values onto your team. You should let your team tell you the values that they want to work within. And I get the logic, but I own the business. I'm paying wages. I'm making decisions on the people I need in the business to deliver the result I want. And the result that I want needs to be delivered in a certain way that I feel connected to personally. And that is where values should really come in. Do people share my values to be able to deliver this? Because I might be a cold-hearted capitalist that wants to build a business as quickly as possible. I'm not really that worried about people's work-life balance. I'm going to continue to push people to the absolute limit, but I'm cold-hearted. But I'm the business owner. I'm not saying if it's right or wrong, Derick, but I'm the business owner. And if I've got people in there that want to spend time with their families or believe things should be done in a certain way or want really strong environmental policies, as an example, that ain't going to work.
No.
It's not going to work. So by being clear about that, it's a lot better to say, this isn't for me. I need to go and find a business that shares my values. So as an example, I think that's really important, but there has to be alignment between my values and the values of the people that work for me. And then we get into execution, and execution is how you leverage those assets. And this is all about decision making, prioritization, visibility, control, stretch, understanding parameters. And again, this is people. So you need the right people in place to be able to do these things. So there's some things about execution in here. I've used BCG, Boston Consulting Group, as an example, because we can learn things from enterprise, even though we're not necessarily BCG's target client. We can learn what enterprise do, but this is really key. So we've got analysis, capital, execution, and they're the three secrets to building valuable businesses with predictability and control. And in execution, it's good to follow rule books or checklists or frameworks. And this is where the 5 keys comes in. The 5 keys is very much part of the execution. And I'm talking about Necker Island because a lot of you might know that Necker Island is an island that Richard Branson owns. And I know I'm a Brit, so I have picked a British example. But Richard Branson, obviously with his portfolio of companies under the Virgin brand, is very well known for a certain set of rules and definitely trying to treat people in a way that he can get the best out of them. So some of the quotes that he says, this is about complexity being your enemy as a business owner. And it's easy to make something complicated, but it's harder to make things simple. And this really struck me when people tell me, oh, that's obvious, isn't it? That sounds easy. That's simple. That was actually a sign that, oh, this is good. Because I used to be obsessed with complexity and I used to associate complexity with value and sophistication with value, but it isn't. It's simplicity. And I learned that pretty early on. But back early days, I was always looking for some complexity and oversimplification, overcomplication, because I thought that was where value lay. The next one is a company is made up of people. Employees want to know, are they being listened to or are they a cog in the wheel? And key number 4 is exactly what I created with that in mind. Yeah, can you do it? And if you can't do it, tell me why not, and then we'll try and fix it. So this was really important. And key number 5, which is about when I do it, how am I rewarded and recognized? And I really like this. I believe that drudgery and clock watching are a terrible betrayal of universal inborn entrepreneurial spirit. So the 5 keys is designed so we don't have a drudgery environment or culture, and we don't have clock watchers. We don't have the people that are trying to do the bare minimum, aren't engaged in their work, or don't even have enough work to do. I mean, again, I think you could probably relate to this, but observing and speaking to people in businesses through that acquisition process, it's surprising how you get really busy people, especially in teams. You have 30% of people doing 70% of the work, which is a huge inefficiency. But I found it over and over and over again. And I thought, again, this can't be right. There are people that are telling stories that aren't true, that as a resource manager, I'm believing, and I've probably got 5 people doing the job of 3, just because people have helped me believe that the norm when I do my resource management means that that's the correct allocation, and it's false. So if you think about every single team that you've got, if you had, out of every team of 5, you had 2 too many people, you think about what that cost would be. It would be incredible. So these are some lessons I learned from Richard Branson, really, in terms of thinking, how do I apply this to the 5 keys? So why? Again, not making enough money to get into wealth. You're feeling trapped. So you're the operator who continues to operate the business, but can't find that person that can operate the business for them. You're unsure what to do next because you only know what you know. Like I said, you're the sum total of your life experience to date. You can't really know beyond that unless you've got that ability to think beyond, to be imaginative, be creative. You're feeling like you're never going to get there. You're feeling like you're screwing up and you're feeling stressed. Sorry, Derick, go on.
Yeah, I literally had this conversation with the client yesterday. Very successful guy, very smart guy. He's got multiple businesses and they're all stuck at that $2 to $3 million mark. And he's like, I can't get any of them past there. And he's like, I don't know what to do. Do I need a CFO? Do I need a COO? Do I need a sales wizard? Like, what do I need? He was stuck. And it's exactly what you said, Rob. He doesn't know what he doesn't know. Right. And so so many people think it's all about the answers, and it's not. A lot of times, if you can just ask the right question, the answer becomes obvious. But if you don't know the question to ask, like I always joke about this one, but I'm like, who's the guy that said, hey, we're going to send sound across the world with radio waves, but it's not going to make any sound as we send it? Yeah. Like, who asked that question? How do we send sound silently? Yeah. Like, that's a pretty profound question, right? It is. I don't know who figured that out, but that's a question most of us would not ask. And if someone didn't ask it, we wouldn't have radio broadcast, right?
Yeah.
So something here with what you're saying, if you don't know what you don't know, you need someone who can help you ask the right questions.
Right. And you need a trigger. So if you don't know how you want that vehicle to be leveraged to be able to fund your future lifestyle, it's going to be very hard to make that connection, because I'm going to say 3 words to you and you might be able to guess what I'm going to say is, first of all, you need to connect with your future. What lifestyle do you want? What do you think you deserve? What is it you enjoy doing? What do you want for your family? And the big question is, how are you going to pay for that? So your future lifestyle, think about a year, and then think about how much money you're going to need to be able to fund that lifestyle. You're in a privileged position because you've got a business, which is an asset which you can leverage to be able to get there. The 3 words I'm going to say, Derick, are the wealth gap. So if you were to check out your net worth, liquidity now, how far away are you from being able to fund the lifestyle or retirement that you really want? That starts to trigger those big questions. And the unit, how can I get my business to a valuation of 15 million? How many customers do I need spending an average of this amount of money? How many customers are in the marketplace? What market share do I have now? They're the questions that we need to ask. And that's analysis. So that gets you into the analysis stage. Then you would say, well, what capital do I need to be able to leverage, to be able to increase those units? And then what are my management techniques, playbooks, frameworks that I need to adopt to be able to leverage the capital to be able to achieve that kind of growth? You see what I mean? So it all comes together. So it's really important. And I think, a lot of the time people come to me is because I've tried 5 ways of trying to increase leads and it's just not happening. And somebody said that to me. And I said, okay, when you speak to your head of marketing about where you want the business to go, and they were really ambitious. I'd worked with them for about 3 years. I said, what do they say? Well, first of all, he ignores me. Yeah, they just ignore the conversation. Then they gaslight me and make me feel stupid for thinking that I've got this big ambition and it's possible. And they try and diminish me and say, oh, you don't want to do that. I think, this is a nice sized business. Then when I put the pressure on, they just don't deliver. They slow play me. And I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this, because the last thing this person wanted was some stretch thinking that meant they were going to be in a position of exposure to be able to increase the amount of leads the business needed to be able to hit this ambition. They had to change the input factors. So one, this person was overly comfortable. He wanted to protect the status quo, and he built a fiefdom within his team to protect that. So he was a terrorist within the organization. Secondly, he didn't know enough to be able to come up with new ideas to be able to solve this problem. And 3, he saw himself as signing up for a target that if he didn't reach, questions would be asked. Well, there are people out there that are doing this. Why can't we? It's now your problem. And that is something that's so common. Continually hiring people or working with agencies or consultancies to get the result. If you're in teams arguing, disagreeing, agreeing actions that never get followed through, all of this can really impact the ability to do business well. Quiet quitting, high absentee rates, where the business is failing, so internal KPIs are being missed, and the blame culture. Some of the terms that I've heard, I've heard groups of people being described as a gang of witches. I've heard militarial metaphors to describe the sales team and the delivery team. They're literally in battle. There's warfare going on in your business. That can't be healthy, Derick. And I hear these metaphors and they're just alarm bells. So if you can relate to this, then you need to do something about alignment. And of course, you sign off on most hires. So if that hire doesn't turn out to be good, I want you to look into the mirror and ask yourself the questions that make this up. So rather than thinking, is it an alignment piece, test yourself. Do they really understand where I'm trying to take this business? Do they really think, are they doing the things that I think they should be, their priorities? Is the output of their work in line with what I think it should be like? Do I think they're even confident that they can achieve that output? And are they clear about how they're rewarded or recognized for good work? So I tried to encourage this quite toxic leadership team who were on a pretty quick growth trajectory, US expansion, new clients, new branding. So we had a very clear message about what we were the best in the world at. But I could see the fault lines when it came down to everybody's excited for the vision. The workshops went well. We talked about new markets and new products and services. Everybody wanted to be part of it. And then when the rubber hit the road, there was it was everybody's fault but their own. So I said, look in the mirror. I think, have you ever thought it might be you? Have you ever thought it might be you? Take personal responsibility and ask yourself those questions. Because if the answer is no to any of them, that's the starting point. Make sure they understand it. And this is a way of doing it one way. So this is the easy one where we don't have to involve third parties. So there's nothing stopping anybody going away after this session and putting that into practice, Derick. Yeah. Ask yourself those questions about a particular employee that you had high hopes for that weren't delivering or aren't delivering, and see whether the answer is no. And if it is, then engage them and tell them, I just want to go over, this is where the business is going. Are you excited by that? Do you believe in it? Do you like the way that we're running the business to try and get there? I just want to check in with you. Are you aware that these are the things I really needed you to do? And I don't really value those things that you're doing. They're great, but it's not what I need right now. Do you see what I mean? So you're kind of asking yourself those questions and seeing whether the answer would be no. And when you roll this out properly, and the deeper you go in, you're going to get inflated value. It's just going to explode. So, and this is funny. 2 business partners, 5 keys, Derick, completely different. Different. What's your ambition for the business in 5 years? Completely different. Out of these 5 words, how would you describe the way that you run the business? Completely different. And quite often you get somebody in a partnership that might be finance and ops and somebody that's more sales and marketing. And when you go through this sort of exercise, it's great how they think they're doing a great job, but the business partner's not doing a great job. Mm-hmm. It's just this mismatch of what should we be doing in ops and finance and what should we be doing in sales and marketing. And because there isn't that clarity, it's just perception. Sure. It's unbelievable. Actually shocking by that. But so business partners need to get on, it's called get on the same page. Because if you're not on the same page, you're working against each other and causing tons and tons of tension. And if you don't know what's going on, then how the hell do you expect your very expensive, very volatile, but pivotal in your success people asset to know that as well? And then leadership team, it cascades, management team, employees, contractors, agencies, supply chain. Whatever we're doing that says you're being paid to deliver an outcome should be going through some element of the 5 keys. And it's like a battery. I've talked about privileged position. You've got a business. Amazing. You can leverage and scale that using the right approach. But the battery has only got so much power. And we can't just summon up power from anywhere. We have to do what we need to do with that asset. And that power is the value of the capital. Now, if it's all going in the same direction, then we start to build momentum and force. And I hope there's no scientists on it, because I'm probably going to use some metaphors that are going to be scientifically wrong. But hopefully they're illustrative of the point I want to make, is that if you've got like Brownian motion and you've got this sort of uncontrolled energy just moving around, floating, no particular direction, or even worse, if there's power, just this wasted kinetic energy where you've got those ball bearings just firing off each other, again, no control. But if we can take those ball bearings and compact them and build power behind them and propel them forward, then we create a missile. And what does a missile do? It does incredible levels of damage in a good way. We are creating a force that's going to make huge amounts of impact. And again, back to my formula, that combination of mass versus propulsion and velocity, it gives us that outcome. So they're really interested in those input factors of building those molecular structures, creating weight, and then creating a force of propulsion by all channeling it in the same direction equals a result that's driven by power. So think about your business as energy and how you harness that energy by focusing it in on one outcome. Because, again, with that battery, if I've got 7 lights connected to it, they're going to be dim. If I've got 1 light connected to it, it's going to be much brighter. My God, it's like going back to elementary physics. But it's a good way of being able to see how this works in harnessing the energy to be able to grow the business. So we want everybody running in the same direction. Now, apologies, this is a PDF and this was meant to be a GIF. And we've got all of the runners on the starting line, 100-meter sprint, and the gun goes off and they all run off in different directions. That's what the GIF shows. And I see so many businesses that do that as well. Yeah, where they're ready to go, but because of a lack of alignment, they're all going in different directions, and that isn't good for the business. So I'm going to go through the 5 keys now, Derick, and I'd love you to give me your experiences or ask any questions, because I really want this to be something that people write down, take away, and ask themselves those questions first, and then they go to their business partner or their leadership team and start to do it. And a really good way of doing it when it's not just you is just have the blank piece of paper. And it's a bit like Snap, yeah? So you would say, okay, question number 1, where do we think our revenue is going to be in 5 years' time? Where's our revenue going to be in 3 years' time? What's our target this year? What would our target operating profit margin be? Target. Yeah?
So what I hear you saying, Rob, is what's our vision? What are our goals? Right?
Yeah.
If you're not clear on that, and I know this sounds really obvious to people, right? Once again, isn't that obvious? Most business owners I work with, they have a revenue goal and that's it. Mm-hmm. Well, I want to go from $1 million to $1.3 million. I want to go from 2 million to 2.4, right? Look at last year, they add a few numbers on top of it. And they say, yeah, I guess that's what we're going to do this year. And that's the only number they track. And there's a lot more to this. That is not a vision. That is a default. Well, I should probably grow by a little bit. I guess that's a good number because we did this much last year. Let's just add a little to it. That's not a vision. Your employees don't buy into that. Your leadership doesn't buy into that. That's you being lazy. Don't take that as a criticism because maybe you didn't know better. But if you don't get the vision right, you can't tell the story to inspire your team. Who can fall in love with someone who doesn't have a story?
Yeah.
Right. Who can fall in love with the mission if the mission is just, well, let's just do a little better than last year?
Yeah.
Is that inspiring to you as a business owner? You want to hear it as your employees will hear it. What do they hear? Oh, we're going to try to do a little better than last year. Yeah. Oh, wow. I'm going to get up and get excited for that. Right. Right. And so there's numbers tied to it, but I think you have to have a story and a vision of why does it matter if we go from $1 million to $1.2 million? Who cares?
Yeah.
Am I just trying to make you rich? I'm an employee or the business owner. I'm just trying to make you rich because that's what people think. Oh, we make a little more money. You get richer. Maybe I get $1 an hour raise or something. I don't know. But that's not what makes people fall in love. So when you think about this, key number 1, creating the vision and mission. What's the story? What's the why? If you don't know this is old information, started really heavily with millennials 10 years ago. People will work for way more money if they're way less money, if they feel like their work matters. And if their work doesn't matter, you almost can't pay people enough. I have a friend who makes almost $250,000 a year, and they feel like the work they do is spinning their wheels. They're not happy. They're good at their job. They like the people they work with. There's zero mission for them, and it undermines it, even though they live a very good life, right? It's that important to people now. And you can say, hey, I pay them a good wage. They should just show up. That's like flip it around. That's like them saying, okay, you pay me X. I'm only going to give you X. That's it.
Right.
Do you want them to approach it that way? No. They don't want you to approach it that way either. You have to have a reason for what you're doing. And so you might have to have a little heart to heart with yourself. Why did I choose this profession? How did I get in this business? Why does it matter? And maybe some people bought businesses because they just want to have an income. Okay, that's great. Within what we do, if I was going to have an impact and make this business worth spending my life's work on and creating a legacy with it, why would I do that? Right. And get clear on it. I know that sounds crazy, but if you don't get this right, nobody gets excited and runs in the same direction for something that doesn't matter to anybody. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah, and I think that story is so important. And you know, on the Wealth Your Way program last week, we talked about the unified goal statement, and that's exactly what we need to create. So people feel like they're involved in something really ambitious and big, but because you've done the analysis, you can tell the story about how you're going to get there. People want to buy into the journey with visibility of how it's going to happen and be part of that. So think about what that timeline is, give it some kind of definition and metrics, and don't be afraid to share finances with the business either. I think it's really important that people understand their contribution. You can talk about it in terms of the amount of customers that you have, or like Bill Gates said, the amount of computers that he wanted, or the software packages on how many desks by X date. That's a really illustrative way of being able to get people to buy into it. But also think about your unique approach to it. You know, what are the non-negotiables, and how do you want to do it? Because quite often, you know, I really like it when, you know, I'm looking at a business to buy and I'm speaking to one of the managers and I notice something quite quirky and I say, oh, that's really interesting. What, you know, where did that come about? And they say, that's just who we are. Yeah. That's just what we do around here. It's like this approach to doing business where you have some special focus on your employees or customer satisfaction. There's just a value and a standard that everybody signs up to. So we will do this by, and you know, these are just some sort of off the top of my head, but you know, treating our employees fairly, prizing our families, recognizing that whilst work is important, we need something else in our life. Customers come first. So there is always going to be a way that you want to do things to be able to get to that result. And also is, do people trust you? Yeah, it's great that Derick wants to build this business to 10 million, but I'm not sure I buy into the plan. All right. And if that is the case, then it's on you to be able to provide greater levels of evidence as to why they should buy into the plan. And if they really can't buy into the plan, then they shouldn't be in your company.
Yeah. So bottom line to this, Rob, is if you don't have a clear vision for the company and where it's going, how could your employees possibly think like a business owner? They can't. Yeah. There's no direction. You know, they're standing there like a boat with the engine on and nowhere to go. So they just let the motor idle.
Yes.
Right? Versus saying we're going to that port, then they can steer the boat like a business owner and take you there. Otherwise, you got a bunch of people standing around with boats with the engine running and nobody at the wheel because they don't know where they're going. So absolutely prerequisite to everything. And that's why this is number one. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's absolutely. And like you can imagine with business partners, you've got to be aligned. If you're not aligned as business partners, you are going to have all kinds of problems. And if you look deeper, you'll be able to see exactly why those are issues. Key number 2 is, what is my role as an employee in achieving this? So I've got 40 hours a week that I could be spending doing stuff, but how do we ensure that the stuff that I'm doing is what I'm being paid to do? Because the calculation is, with your knowledge and skills and the time that we've got access to you for, we believe that we can achieve these results. So that's the next thing that's really important is, do I believe that you are doing the things that I would want you to do? Yeah. So priorities. We could be doing 15 things, but let's be really clear about what are the outcomes and the priorities for that particular role. And again, it's the blank piece of paper. Write down what you think the 3 priorities are for your role, and I'll do the same, and let's see where we've got something different. And it doesn't necessarily mean that I know more than them, because if you look at things like Vanguard and total quality management, the whole point is that we trust the front line to tell us what they need to be doing to be able to create the outcome. So it's an education piece for us. But if I expect you to be doing this and you're not doing that, then I might even want to have a performance conversation with you without giving you the opportunity to say, I think we can do it in a better way to be able to achieve a bigger goal. But often that comes through evolution. You want to make sure you're on a level playing field first, and then you start to put into the framework. Every month, we're going to talk about new ideas on how we can change things. Remember, to keep improving, we've got to keep switching up the input factors, formulas, math, science, yeah? So that's really important. So key number 2 is your role, priorities, and outcomes from the role that we need to do. Then the next one, key number 3, is what does good look like? And I think probably the best example I can give of this is in a marketing agency. And marketing agencies often need to pitch creative ideas to be able to win the business. And there'd be a creative director, and there'd be someone in his team that would be responsible for taking the brief from the client team and putting the actual kind of the pitch together. Now, I would hear comments like, "Oh, they don't know what they're doing. This is really poor standards. Oh, this was so passé. You know, this was 3 years ago we did this. They really haven't understood the brief." But when I challenged a bit further, I went and spoke to the person. I said, "Why have you done it like this?" And they explained in quite a lot of detail the thought process as to why they'd attacked the brief in the way that they had. And I said, "Were you aware, or did you have any direction about how style or standards from the creative director?" And they said no. Now, that is a recipe for disaster. And if that employee-employer relationship lasted longer than 6 months, I'd be very surprised. But again, think about other examples where that's happened in your business. Be clear about what the expectation is, and then at least that gives them the opportunity before they try and reach it to say, "Oh, I'm going to kind of do it in a different way." I've always been of the belief that if you can explain why you've done something a certain way, then can you really be wrong? It's right, when people do things and can't explain it, suggests that they're just chucking it in. Yeah, they're not really focused. They've not given any thought. They've done a bare minimum effort. So think about what good looks like. If there's a house style, share it. Yeah, if you like presentations done a certain way, share it. If you always want branding to be part of how things are presented, share it. If you want managers to ensure that they're having at least 3 performance conversations or check-ins a week with their employees and team, then share that. Do not expect your team to deliver something they don't understand that you hold as a standard. You've got to have that crossover. So we need to know what good looks like. Okay, and that could also be units, leads generated, sales converted, customer tickets dealt to, project progress. Yeah, all customer ticket average. All of these things are units that we need to make sure that we're following. Now, key number 4, my favorite. I genuinely think this is the most powerful key in any business, because before we sign it off and say, okay, we both understand that's what good looks like. They're the goals, they're the priorities. Go and get on with the job. We'll check in on this date and see how you're progressing against them. I'm going to give you the opportunity to tell me that isn't possible. So I always use 90% because I don't believe you can ever be 100%, and I don't believe anything's binary. So I always try and use percentage chances or probability to give me a better understanding of whether something's likely to work and where the risks are. So the question I always ask is, are you 90% confident that you could achieve the standard that we've agreed is what's required? And this is where you get the juice, the really important stuff, where they'll say, no, you're asking me to do something I don't have training for. I don't have the skills for. I don't think with my current workload, I've got time to be able to do that justice. To be able to do my job, I'm expecting this kind of resource support from the other team. And I don't get that very often, which means I have to do more than my job. we don't have systems in place that enable me to be able to execute in that way within that timeline. Yeah. So this is where you get feedback to say, well, I'm about 60%. So what would it take to get to 90%? Well, I need to train in it. So that isn't going to happen for 3-4 months. So we have to be really mindful that if we can't get the outcome in key number 3, then we've got to adjust the input. Yeah. We've got to be able to say, if we can't get that outcome, unless we can adjust the input by putting more money into it or getting people trained, otherwise we've got to change the outcome. Because again, we can't set people up to fail. People need to be set up to succeed. So if we agree on the outcome and they're 90% confident, big green tick, that goes into delivery. And I'm going to measure your performance against that. So are you 90% confident is a crucial key that I think is one of the most important in the 5 keys. And then key number 5 is, how am I rewarded and recognized? So culturally, if somebody does a good job, what happens? A manager's there to kind of say congratulations in front of the rest of the team. Is it a town hall where every month when we have an all-team meeting, they get called out? Is it an email circular or a Slack channel? Is it a bonus? Is it points towards an end-of-year bonus? Does it count towards development and moving into new roles? So there's a framework for where people can see that they're doing a good job and they get the glow of recognition, or they get the tangible success kind of reward of higher salaries, increased roles, more development, bonuses, all of those sorts of things. So again, that's a key that I would ask myself. Do people really know in your organization how we reward them? Now, it could be culturally or it could be tangibly. So again, blank sheet of paper. If you do good, what is your expectation from the business? And it might be a handshake from the manager, which is fine. But if it's understood that's all it is, then that's great. But if people are expecting bonuses, if they perform well, even if the business doesn't, I'll tell you something, that leads to more attrition than anything else. The expectation that I'm doing a good job, I need to be rewarded. It's not my problem if the rest of the organization is messing up. Okay. And these are real conversations that happen in organizations all the time. So the action plan is, are you clear on your 5 keys? Doesn't matter what stage of the business you're at. Are you clear on what your performance expectations are, the standards? Can you do it? Are you 90% confident in your plan? Because half of business owners I speak to probably aren't, which is dangerous. We have to be 90% confident. So if you tell me you're 50% confident, I'm going to immediately say, how do we get it to 90? What needs to change? Yeah. Then do the exercise, blank sheets of paper, go through the questions with your co-owner or partner. Then do the same with the leadership team as a workshop, and then roll out across the business. When you've got that alignment, and it's still not going to be perfect, but you're going to be moving it a lot further forward just by having that knowledge and understanding that we believe and understand this kind of common frame of reference around where the organization's going, what you need to be doing, the standard in your role, ensuring there's a high level of confidence, and how we reward you. It moves commitment, engagement, and performance significantly. And that's when you're in a position to roll it out across the business. And that is the 5 keys, or the 5-question mind trick that gets your employees to think like owners.
Right. So like you said, Rob, just to recap this for people, what is your vision and mission? You have to have a clear and compelling goal so everybody can look and move in the same direction, right? Second, everybody has to know their part in that very clearly, right? What is my role in us getting there? Third, what are the standards we're moving or using for that? As you like to say, what does good look like? A lot of people are unclear. And if it's undefined, people will make up their own. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I do partner dancing and competitive dancing. And I've worked with world champions. And I've worked with people who kind of do a decent job in their local community. The level at which they dance and they train and the level of detail is completely different. One is, the equivalent of a piano recital. The other is the equivalent of Dancing with the Stars, right? Totally different things because of the standard they set. Not saying one or the other is better. but we all have to agree on what that looks like. The fourth one, like you said, is, are you 90% sure we can accomplish this? If you don't have 90% confidence, what needs to change for you to get there, right? And then the last one is, if you do your job in us moving in this direction, what's in it for you?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Pretty straightforward. And I'm using different words than you because sometimes different words land for people.
Yeah, no, you've got it. That's exactly it. It's that simple. And I've seen people spend upwards of $50,000 on consultants to try and solve some of the issues we talked about earlier on. I genuinely feel that you won't get the effectiveness of change if you don't have the 5 keys in as a foundation. And that's why, along with the other things I do, I want to bring the 5 keys to as many business owners in the world as I can in the next decade. Because I think it's so important, and where it's been applied. And people that have read the early manuscript of the book have just been overwhelming in terms of, I've never looked at my business in this way.
Yeah. I mean, it's simple and profound. And you talked about complexity versus simplicity. There's simplicity on the near side of complexity, which is too simple. Mm-hmm. There's complexity in the middle that takes a lot to say a lot. And then there's simplicity on the far side of complexity, and that's poetry. That's when someone can say a few words and tell a huge story, right? They say the small words. I have a great example of this, and I like to read. And as a writer, I always try to keep things simple. But a story I heard that I thought was really neat was Hemingway was a big fan of simplicity. And somebody challenged him to write the simplest story that he could. So he wrote a story in 6 words, right? And you're like, how much can you say in 6 words? So let me tell you the story. Baby shoes for sale, never used. And there's like a whole story about why weren't they used? What happened to the baby? What, like there's this whole thing. So he said so much with 6 words, right? Yeah. And I think the 5 keys does that. In 5 questions, if you can get super clear on these, and every person on your team is super clear on these, they'll think like you because they know where they're going. They know their part in it. They know what standard they're held to. They know exactly what's in it for them, and they're 90% sure they can get there, right? It's that simple. And so this is something anybody can apply. Now, for those of you who are here, obviously, knowing these things, doing these things, implementing them, there's lots of questions. So Rob and I want to offer anybody who's on the webinar here a strategy session to talk through this stuff, okay? See where you're at, help you analyze. Maybe you are clear, maybe you're not. Maybe there's some nuances or some things you're hooked on. So where you can go is you can either go to biglifefinancial.com, and there's a button up in the corner that says work with us. You can click on that and schedule a time with us, or another way to schedule a time is to go to biglifefinancial.com. In fact, Rob, if you stop, I will share my screen here, but it's 5Q-webinar will give us a chance to work, talk with you and do a strategy session. I think it'll be very, very useful to anybody. There's no obligation of anything here. It's just if you want to have a chance to talk through this, because I know business is complicated, right? Everybody's got their stuff going up. So let me make sure I'm getting the right screen here, but hopefully I got it. This is it right here. biglifefinancial.com/5Q, like 5 questions -webinar. If you go there, you'll have an opportunity to set an appointment with myself or Rob or someone on our team. And we'll be able to help you walk through this, analyze it. And quite honestly, a lot of this is if you just get really clear on these things, then suddenly the things that are slowing your business down start to show up. And it becomes really obvious, hey, this is a glaring restraint for us or constraint for us. This is something that's totally bottlenecking our business. As you go through these 5 questions yourself, then leadership, then with your whole team, it will totally transform what you're doing. So once again, biglifefinancial.com /5Q-webinar. you can set up a time to talk with myself or Rob, and we'd love to work with you guys on it. So I think that's pretty much it. Rob, do you have any questions?
I was just going to say, we know we have repeat attendees, and we've been talking about exits and mergers and acquisitions for the last, or buying businesses for the last couple of months. But this is still very relevant, where everything I talk about is all about the asset value of your business. And whether this is in your core business, your platform business, your first business, or whether you're using it to upscale a business that you've just acquired, or even assess where the alignment is in businesses that you're looking to acquire, it's still highly relevant. But the bits around setting the future pathway, the ambition, the goals are essential. You've got to know where you're going, and you've got to know what you're building towards. Otherwise, how can you hang your priorities and time and resources on anything that enables you to be able to leverage it? So there, as an investor, just think about leveraging assets to be able to get to that result. So thanks, as always, everyone, for attending. I'm really grateful that people show up and listen to us talk about this stuff, Derick, because one, I find it very interesting. Two, I really believe this sort of education and knowledge are going to help people. So thank you. I really hope in the future we get to speak to some of you in person, whether it's the strategy session or whether you sign up to Wealth Your Way, which is our group program. But keep tuning in, keep accessing the content. I really hope you find it useful. If there's things you want us to discuss, email Derick and let him know, and we'll be happy, if we're qualified to speak about it, that is, to include it on the roster. But thanks again, and look forward to speaking and seeing you soon.
Yeah, Rob, I know that people are really glad that you do this. And I think, we've done your introduction before, but people don't realize, you've done this you've done 30 something exits. You've helped hundreds of business owners buy additional locations and do mergers and acquisitions. They're getting the real deal here and high quality information. So I think sometimes you sell yourself short, which is what I love about you, is that you're still humble and down to earth, even though you've got this incredible skill set. So I learn something every time we talk. And we really appreciate you being here and taking your time with us. So thank you again. And, everybody, watch for more. If you haven't seen the other 4 or 5 that we've done in the last month or two, sign up for a strategy session. Let us know. We can get you the copies of where you can watch those other ones. And it really is a business education that you can't get very many places. And I think it's just tremendously valuable. So you guys showing up here, we really appreciate it. We're going to keep doing it. Let us know if you need something. Otherwise, grab a spot on our calendar, and we'll take it from there. Thanks, you guys.